Thanks for watching the Abundant Life Family Podcast. I'm Bill.
And I'm Jen.
We're the Hildebrands. We're helping to build families that last. Today we have a counselor, Carolyn Asher, with us as we talk about children and helping them to grieve. Well, Carolyn, thank you so much for being with us today on our podcast,
Yes.
and I really appreciate that. First of all, tell us just a little bit about yourself and how did you come to become a counselor?
Well, it's a neat story to me, and you can always trace God back to where he's moving in your life. And I trace it all the way back to when I was in high school and just some little bit of confusion in high school. And then once I got through it, I got saved at 19. And then I had to declare a major. And I'm like, well, I'd like to help kids through high school. So that's how it started. And so that's what I did. I declared a psychology major back in my 20s. So that's where it very first started. Went into biblical counseling after that, and then had a family. And so I kind of left my studies, raised my family. My youngest was 16. She got her driver's license. And it's like I had all this time now. And I'm like, okay, the house is clean over and over and over. I've got to do something else. And so I went back to college and went into my master's. And then I'm here today. Yeah. And I would say along that way, I was a gymnast growing up.
Okay.
And was around girls all the time. Right, 15, I started coaching. And that lasted for 35 years of coaching gymnastics. And so I knew girls. And so when I started counseling, I was very aware of how girls think, how young teenagers think. And so my kind of what I focus on is ladies, girls, young adult women. Yeah.
And God blessed you with 3 daughters and 1 son.
Yes. And so more girls. More girls.
We don't know
Love
what
it.
to do with girls.
Well,
4 boys.
Yes. We specialize in boy stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
4 boys.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Now, as we talk with you, you said you focus on women and girls especially. And so we wanted to talk with you today about, as a parent, how do you help your kids, especially when it comes to grief and grieving? How do you help your kids to work through that? And just something that we experienced recently really made us think about this.
Yeah. So my brother passed away just a month ago with a long battle with cancer. And, I was at his service and it was really powerful, but I happened to look over at a family member who was crying, and it was a beautiful moment to just see the family all together, standing together, grieving for the loss of my brother. And I looked over at one of the younger family members, and he was about 12, and he was standing there very stoic. And it made me think, oh my goodness, like the importance and the power of helping our children grieve. And as parents, sometimes we don't know how to grieve, let alone if our children are grieving. And it just struck me like this would be a podcast. And I know that's hitting home for me. So I'm excited to hear about some of the things that tips and things to be looking for as parents, and we talk all the time about being intentional, but again, just really being intentional about helping. Grief is going to come.
Right.
And how do we deal with it? So anyways.
Yes. So it's so important to learn to grieve. I had a client come in, and her brother had an accident, and her parents were grieving and didn't know how to help her. And so she grew up.
How old was she when this accident
She was
happened?
around 6 or 8.
Okay.
Yeah. And so losing her brother and not her parents were just, she felt abandoned. And so it's very important that we help our kids to grieve and know how to grieve ourselves as adults. So we have that has been researched 5 stages in grief. And the first initial stage is denial. And so at first we don't know, what's going on. We're confused. We don't know how to go forward. We don't know how to live without this person. And it's, we shove our emotions down, but this is kind of a defense mechanism for us as well.
Sure.
To get through that time. Yeah. And then we go into a stage, it's called an anger stage, but that could be looked so many different ways. It doesn't have to look like anger. It can look at like so many different emotions. And in this stage, we're wrestling, and we're wrestling with, we can be mad at like parents, or we can be mad at, something, another person or God. And so all these angry feelings kind of come up and are different feelings.
Going back to the denial one, can that also include like, I'll suck it up. I can tough my way through this. This isn't a big thing.
Yes.
And so
I would say that.
Would that be denial too?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll get through this. And it's so important to process.
Can you go from denial to anger and then back to denial?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. So you can go back and then go forward and go back and go forward. And yeah, in each of these stages, you
Okay.
can.
When we look at these different stages, what's the next stage?
The next stage is bargaining. And
Okay.
bargaining is when we say to ourselves, what if we would have done this? Or what if they would have done this? If only they would have done this, they would still be here. Or if this situation wouldn't have happened, they would still be here. And so you kind of bargain with the outcome and what could have happened, and maybe a little bit of bargaining with God as well.
What
So,
if?
yeah. Or if only. Yeah.
I thought of those so many times. And with grief, my parents got a divorce when I was a kid growing up, and I can see these different stages.
Yes.
But there's so many different times when our dog died, and our kids, our boys had to go through that. Then,
Right.
or moving to Kenya, that's a big stage of grief.
Yeah,
And the kids, well, what if? What if?
for sure.
Right. And I went through that stage as well. All the stages of grief when I empty nested.
Okay.
So when I empty nested, I was like, and I would say that, well, what if she lives here for another, while she goes to college, what if, and
right.
she's only in her early 20s. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
She's only in her 40s.
Right.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
after that,
And then we go into a stage that's pretty hard and you can get stuck in. And we go into a stage of depression. And so this stage it's just trying to put one foot in front of the other. You're kind of numb. You're kind of numb all the whole way through this time. And then the sadness sets in. And really during this time, if you find yourself stuck, I would seek, a counselor or someone you could talk to, someone you can process with during this time.
The depression is a hard place to be.
Right.
So you definitely don't want to stay in that too long.
Yeah.
And then so your input would be, if you recognize that you're in depression, it's definitely get counseling. And that could be, and it doesn't always mean, professional help. Just maybe it could be
Right.
opening up to a friend,
Exactly.
visiting with your pastor,
Right.
someone
Yes.
safe who understands and can be empathetic and really listen and
Right.
hear what's going on in your heart, can help you
Yes.
bounce out of that.
Yes.
And then once you come out of depression, what is the last stage?
Well, the last stage is what gives us hope. It's actually acceptance. So we finally accept that. So
Okay.
the process can take an average of about 2 years. And that is not set. It can take shorter, it can take longer. But once we get to the acceptance stage, we find a little bit of lifting in our hearts and a little bit of hope. And especially us as Christians, we can find that hope in Christ the whole way through, leaning on Him. And in Jeremiah 29:11, it says to call upon the Lord, and He will give us hope. And His ways for us is for us to prosper and to have abundant life and hope in Him. And so I think of that verse, and He says, "Come and pray to me." And so, staying close to the Lord the whole way through, and having that relationship with Him can help us as Christians, can help us get through this process.
Okay. Let's say I'm that person that's going through grief, and I'm right at the beginning, denial is hitting, whatever. What do I need to do?
Well, I would find someone that could help me go through it. I
Okay.
would, whoever that is, a parent, a friend, a pastor, someone in your church. I would find someone to go through that. And as kids, because we were talking about kids, I think it's important that we, as a parent, if our family's going through something, as a parent, we grieve well and show that that time with the Lord, how we can lean on Him, bringing those verses up, having the child talk to you. How are you feeling? And then tell me about that. Be curious and help them get those emotions out.
Do you think it's okay as a parent to be able to say, like if your family is grieving, like for example, the death of my brother, that it's okay to say, to your child, this is hard, mom is sad,
Yes.
and be vulnerable and show that emotion? Because I think sometimes parents think, I have to be strong. I have to, because I can't let them see that I'm grieving, that I'm,
No.
is there benefits
Well,
to, I'm thinking it would be by being vulnerable and saying, I'm
Yes.
grieving, therefore it's okay for
You're
you.
modeling it, right?
You're modeling it
Absolutely.
and saying, whereas if you don't show it and you just pretend that you're okay, then
Absolutely.
it models to your kid. Like, I have to pull it up by the bootstraps
Well,
and not show that emotion.
I think of Jesus and Mary and Lazarus. And Mary's running to him. Lazarus has been dead for 3 days. And Mary sees him coming down the road. Jesus hasn't been around. And she's like saying, Lord, if you'd only had been here, he wouldn't have died. And Jesus, he wept.
Yeah.
He cried with her. It's okay to cry together.
Yeah.
It is a sad time. And it's okay to feel each other's sadness. Yeah.
I know you mentioned earlier when we were just chit-chatting about how you use an emotion or a feelings wheel.
Yes.
And I think that is really important because sometimes we can't identify how we're feeling, but that's really important. Tell us a little bit about the power of the feeling wheel.
Right. So a feeling wheel has your basic emotions on it, and then it can break off into some smaller emotions too.
Okay.
Not smaller emotions, but that are in the same category. Say loneliness, it can break off into abandonment. And so we look at that, and we can have the child look at that and look at the different emotions on that and ask them, what are you feeling? And they can say, I'm feeling abandoned, or I'm feeling lonely. I miss this person. And so they can pinpoint exactly what they're feeling on there, and that does help them heal. And it does. And as a parent, we can say, "Tell me more about that."
That's good.
Yeah. And so then they're feeling heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They feel heard. It helps build their emotional intelligence.
Yes.
So they can actually verbalize what they're feeling and get it out there. They're not just holding it in.
Right.
Those
Yes.
are good.
Right.
And I know that, in a home, you're going to have varying degrees of grief, from learning how to grieve over, a family pet. That can be very real.
yeah.
And, bringing out that emotion wheel or the feeling wheel, what your 3 or 4-year-old, you may have to say, how are you feeling? Is it more sad, angry, more basic emotions?
Right.
But
Yes.
maybe if you have a 15, 16-year-old in the home, you can go further out into that emotion wheel and help them
Right.
navigate a more specific feeling or emotion that they have at that time. And I think that
Yes.
is so powerful and so
Yes.
good.
Right.
And we're like, do you just look it up on we have an emotion wheel. And I think we just print it out from the internet, but is there one, that's better than the other? Or would you just say you could get an emotion wheel just on the internet?
I would say you can just get one off the internet.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You can actually just look one up on your phone, or you can order one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they vary in the number of words. Like with children, small children, you don't want that many words.
Right.
But you want it to grow as you grow and mature.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. You want the very basic feelings for young children. Yes.
So what would be the tips that you would give if you are a parent and your family is going through grief and loss? What would be some of the things that you would share with a family?
Right. So I look at coping skills, and I look at, okay, how can I help this person, through this? And for an adult, I would say journaling's good. Process with a person. Journaling's really good to get those emotions out. And actually, the handwriting it is a really good way to do that as well. And then teens, I would say the same thing. And then we get into our kids, and I think what's more important, and this is for sure for adults as well, but maybe a memory box of that person. And you can put little memories of them. You can write them and put them in there. Okay. Or maybe you have some items from that person that you can put in there. And our scrapbook. And you can have just a little memory, and keeping those memories alive by going back to it. And keeping that person alive in your life, and in your heart, and remembering them.
Would you encourage a family to continue to talk about, like, if it is a pet, like, is that healthy, or a grandparent? Some people are nervous about, I don't want to talk about it. But have you found that that's a powerful tool to help move through grief, is talking about it?
I know in some situations, I remember grieving myself through empty nesting.
Yeah.
That to talk about it would just bring a lot of tears. So whenever, it was appropriate. Yes, I think that was a good thing, to talk about. I know at times it's very sensitive for me. And so sometimes I didn't want to cry in the moment, or I didn't want to go there in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I know that as we, just because I'm going back to what I'm experiencing with grief right now, that I enjoy, when I'm with my mom and dad, talking about my brother. And, my mom really is enjoying, remembering the funny things that my brother did. And, and we are approaching the holidays. I mean, we lived through it through Thanksgiving.
Yes.
We're moving into Christmas. And I'm wondering, as we get together this Saturday, what that's going to look like. Do you have any tips for families to help their kids to get through the holidays if they're grieving the loss of someone or a pet or something?
Yeah, I would say, journaling is really good, and talking about the fun memories is good, and it can bring some laughs sometimes and bring some relief as well. So I would say the memories, the fun memories, maybe, if so-and-so was here, they would have said this, things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And if I'm sitting down with some of my family members, like her parents, maybe how do I best help them to move through? Do I need to like recognize the stages, and do I help force them through the stages? Do I help
No.
them
I don't think
encourage?
there's no.
You can't force
I
them
don't
to.
Guess you
think there's
can't
any
push.
forcing. I don't think. I mean, I really go back to when I was truly grieving with empty nesting, and there was nothing really that could get me through that that sad stage of my life looks different. I don't want it to look different. I wanted that to stay the same.
Yeah.
But there I was. And that stage, I tried to force, I knew what to do. And I tried to force myself through, and I didn't find the acceptance stage till I was ready, really.
Yeah.
And then that stage came, and I can remember thinking, oh, wow, a lift in that spirit of sadness that was in me. I know along the way, during that stage of sadness, knowing that knowing from counseling, we can go into a coping, like, what are we grateful for? Scientists come to a point where they see it can change the brain and the way we think. Just 3 things you're grateful for in the morning. And Jesus has said the same thing. And as we think in our heart, so are we, right? And so I remember, even before I would open my eyes in the morning, okay, what's 3 things I'm grateful for?
That's good.
Yeah.
That is good.
And I would start listing them.
Now,
Yes.
did you get to the point where you saw somebody else, whether it was a professional or maybe it was a friend, who helped you empty nesting?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did.
How do you know when you're stuck and, boy, or maybe you see somebody who's stuck, what do you do?
Right.
Somebody's stuck in depression, or somebody's stuck in denial,
Right.
or even the anger. Don't want to see somebody stuck there too long.
Right. Yeah. So if you find yourself stuck, or if you see someone that's stuck, just encouraging them to open up and process. And if not with you, with someone else, and with a therapist if need be. If you think, that you're so stuck, you just need someone that knows how to get you through this, knows that they can help you find some coping skills the way through, all the way
And a plate
through.
of cookies and a box of tissue papers and one time sitting down talking through it is going to be it, right? Just one time.
Although it'd be
If
good.
I'm helping my friend,
It does bring some relief. but
but it's probably going to be more long haul, isn't it?
yes, it is.
I know that when we took our family to Kenya, our son, one of our sons was in 4th grade, and he was really grieving just home and the things that he knew, things that he was comfortable with. Everything had changed.
Right.
And I didn't realize it as a mom that my son was really deeply grieving, and he started to pull into himself and wasn't talking, wasn't communicating. And it was actually his teacher who reached out to me through some of his artwork that she had noticed a change in it and was, so showed it to me. And, my son didn't really want to talk about it. It wasn't that he didn't want to talk about it. He didn't know how to put words to what he was feeling. And a counselor told me to start a little journal with him, not long, not paragraphs, but I started a notebook and I wrote this is, just something about him, like, hey, I noticed yesterday that you were playing soccer with your friends. How did that go? Was that fun? And then I would draw a little picture, and I would take the pencil in the notebook and I'd put it on his bed, and I would just leave it there.
Yeah.
And it might be a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week would go by, and then I would find the notebook on my bed. And he would respond back to that. And, over a course of a couple, 2-3 months, he was able to start talking. It really was quite incredible. I was so thankful for that because I'm such a verbal person, but he just wasn't able. And through that journaling and drawing the pictures, it wasn't that we even talked about necessarily about his grief, but he was able to start just opening up to us again, which then we were able to move through. And then I was able to have a conversation with him.
Right.
And we kind of got to the bottom of maybe some of the things that we needed to change as parents to help him adjust to this new environment and culture.
I love that.
And it was powerful.
Yes, I love that. That's a great tool.
Yeah.
And I would say if you're going to do that, do it with the feelings wheel there, because then they can start looking what
Yes,
what am
I didn't
feeling?
even know about the feelings wheel then. So that's so good.
It's very good.
Yeah.
I thank you so much. I think we've just scratched the surface, but we did help people to understand there's 5 stages and there's hope at the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
Allow yourself or help guide your kids as they walk through that.
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
there's hope that Jesus brings especially.
Right.
So thank you for being with us this
You are
morning.
welcome. Thank you for having me.
you.
Yes.
Can I pray with you?
Absolutely.
So Lord, as we come together right now and I want to thank you for making us emotional beings and beings who are meant to be in community. So you put community around us. Help us not to withdraw, but Lord, help us to seek the help that we need as parents, but then especially help us to seek the help that our kids need and to help them to walk through grief and not just ignore it. So God, I thank you just for the great things, the great points that you've given to us today. We love you, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Abundant Life Family Podcast. If you found this helpful for your family, hit like and subscribe below. And feel free to drop a comment or question below. To learn more about the Abundant Life Family Ministry and the 10-mile markers to help you win at building families that last, go to our website at livingproof.co/family.